The story of the shocking case in 1993 in the UK, where a 3-year-old boy was brutally murdered. The two cold-blooded murderers, who were only 10 years old, heartlessly killed the victim after kidnapping and torturing the 3-year-old child. Many people couldn't believe that two children could commit such horrifying acts. The authorities had to spend a lot of time investigating and analysing the statements from John and Robert. As a result, a terrifying truth that shocked Liverpool and the whole of the UK was revealed. The James Bulger case. On February 12, 1993, James Bulger, a 3-year-old boy, was taken shopping by his mother, Denise Bulger, and Aunt Nicola at the Bootle Strand shopping centre in Liverpool, England. Throughout the shopping trip, Denise kept an eye on her little son, never letting James out of her sight. However, around 3:40 p.m, while Denise was busy queuing at the meat counter, James mysteriously disappeared. Although Denise quickly noticed James's absence and searched everywhere, no trace of the boy was found. In a state of panic, Denise ran to the security room to ask them to announce the search for her son over the loudspeaker. She provided them with all the necessary information about James. However, there was no response. Eventually, Denise and the security staff decided to search for James at every stall. James's sudden and mysterious disappearance caused panic and started an urgent search. About an hour after James went missing, the Marsh Lane police station received a report about the incident. Initially, they believed that a small child like James couldn't have gone far, so they mobilized a large police force scattered across all roads in the area to search for James. However, all their efforts yielded no results. That night, a news bulletin about the disappearance was broadcast on television. Immediately, the local police station received continuous phone calls from the public providing information about the child. However, due to the abundance of conflicting information, the police's investigation process encountered many difficulties and reached a deadlock. In the dark night, the investigation team decided to spend time reviewing the video footage they had collected from the crime scene. They tried to examine each detail carefully, hoping to find some important clues. Finally, they recognized the image of James appearing on the security camera screen. In the video, James was seen following two other children who seemed to be between 10 and 12 years old. However, because the camera recorded the image from a rather distant angle, they could only see the backs of the 3 children. This posed a major challenge for the police, as they could not identify the faces of the 2 children who had kidnapped James. The investigation team conducted a search and followed up on the leads. Some of them interrogated local residents, hoping to identify the 2 children. The rest searched along the roads and under the water in the canal. However, after 2 days of searching, no additional clues were found. Discovery of the body. On the afternoon of February 14, 1993, a group of children playing on the railway tracks at a station on Church Road West discovered a part of a body. They were extremely frightened and quickly sought an adult to report it. The body was later confirmed to be James's. The police quickly cordoned off the area and stopped the trains from entering the station to conduct an investigation. They couldn't recognize it because it really looked like a small doll left forgotten on the tracks. When discovered, James's body was not intact. The lower part of the boy's body had been run over by a train and scattered under the tracks. James's tiny legs were still wearing the roller skates he liked. The jacket-style shirt that James wore was torn to shreds, showing the brutality of the torture. James's lips and eyes were bruised from being beaten. The police quickly cordoned off the crime scene and conducted an investigation. They also found nearby a large iron bar, about 0.6 meters long, along with many bricks and stones stained with blood. These items were believed to be the murder weapons of the perpetrator. They also seized 3 AA batteries, a fairly new can of sky blue paint near the victim's body. Dr. Alan Williams, who was in charge of the case, conducted an examination of James's body. On James's body, he found about 40 separate wounds. Most of these wounds were on the boy's face and head. In addition, James's body had many bruises, showing that the boy had endured strong blows. Moreover, Dr. Williams also discovered many broken and cracked bones. These results not only showed the brutality of the case, but also increased public outrage. The 2 child murderers. On the day of the incident, Robert Thompson and John Venables decided to skip school. They walked to the Bootle Strand shopping area, where they began a series of illegal activities. They paid attention to when the shopkeepers turned away to steal items. Among the items they took were batteries, paint, battery-operated dolls, fruits, and candies. When the shopkeepers started paying attention to them, they ran away. According to the investigation of the case, the police said that earlier they had tried to kidnap a 4-year-old girl, but this girl resisted fiercely and screamed, so they gave up. Then they saw James. During this process, they noticed that James was playing alone. A dark intention arose in their minds. They decided to kidnap the boy. Using flattering words and offering candy, Robert Thompson and John Venables successfully lured James to follow them. On the way, James cried for his mother, attracting the attention of passers-by, but no one cared because they thought the 2 children were comforting their younger brother. The shopping centre's camera recorded the 3 children. Leaving Bootle Strand at 3:40 p.m., they led James out of the shopping centre, starting a series of horrifying events that no one could have imagined. Around 5:30 p.m., after walking more than 3 kilometers, Venables and Thompson made a cruel decision. They would end the game at a nearby railway. Here, they began to torture James with a belt. When arrested, the 2 child murderers confessed to the horrific actions they had committed against James. When they had had enough fun, they placed the boy on the tracks and left before the first train arrived. Controversy over the verdict. On February 18, 1993, the police brought arrest warrants to the homes of Robert Thompson and John Venables. The 2 murderers screamed in terror. In November 1993, the case was brought to trial. Before the trial, the young defendants were taken for psychological treatment, since both were under 14 years old. Explaining to them the severity of the murder they had committed was very difficult. John and Robert were then relocated and protected into separate areas, waiting until they were adults to be held accountable for their crimes. The trial took place in a tense atmosphere, with public attention. Everyone was waiting for a fair result for James. However, dealing with the case with 2 young defendants posed many challenges for the legal system. The public was outraged and demanded the death penalty for the 2 murderers. However, according to lawyers, the 2 did not intend to kill from the beginning. They did not carry weapons when committing the crime, showing that there was no premeditated intention to commit the crime. The crime occurred due to the idea of kidnapping for fun. The court convicted both of them of murder and sentenced them to 8 years in prison. In addition, Robert Thompson had to pay a fine of £15,000 and John Venables had to pay a fine of £29,000 because they committed the crime when they were young. They were allowed to change their identities and personal information to start a new life. The parents of John Venables and Robert Thompson could not appear in court and were strictly protected. After the verdict was announced in 1994, the public reacted strongly, demanding a fairer and stricter judgment. The UK Home Secretary proposed increasing the sentence to 15 years. However, the English court and the European Human Rights Commission rejected this proposal and kept the sentence. In 2001, based on positive behaviours and assessments that they no longer pose a danger to society, the authorities allowed the two criminals to be released from prison. This caused many protests, as many people disagreed with the authorities' decision, arguing that the punishment they received was still not enough compared to what they had done to James. The James Bulger case has left a profound mark on the history of crime in England when two children, John Venables and Robert Thompson, at just 10 years old, committed a horrific crime. Although they were prosecuted under the law, the consequences and trauma that the case brought about still linger in the public's mind. Thank you for watching. If you have any information about the case, please comment below to let me know.